Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about upcoming exhibits and other opportunities for the general public. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guests Amy Johnson, Marge Conley, and John Nye Cullity, all of whom are associated with the Benjamin Nye Homestead Museum, which is located in Sandwich. Amy serves as the executive director, Marge is the curator, and John's position is that of senior historian. During the program, we're learning all about the history and mission of the site. We'll go on a behind-the-scenes tour of the property, and in the process, come to better understand and appreciate the various programs, events, and other opportunities that are available for visitors today. Let's start by meeting Amy, Marge, and John, and then hearing all about the Benjamin Nye Homestead Museum. Welcome. So delighted you're all able to be here.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Before we jump right to the museum and related sites, I think it would be of interest just to briefly hear a little bit more about each of your backgrounds and association with the museum. Amy, would you please start?
Sure, of course. Hi, everyone. My name's Amy Johnson, and I'm very honored to be the director here at the Nye Museum and to work with Marge and John and our other wonderful staff. I joined about a year and a half ago, and I'm also a member of the New England Museum Association and the Cape Cod Museum Trail, and we're very happy to be here and doing this interview with you, Jay.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Marge, a few words about yourself, please.
I have been here for a very long time, and I had the pleasure of knowing Rosanna. And I spun for her on my spinning wheel for all of her special events. And then as my children got older, I started doing tours here in 1996. And then I became curator, a great honor, the second curator after Rosanna passed. So that is why I'm here. I do have a background in history and fine arts, and this place is kind of a second home for me.
Wonderful, wonderful. John, welcome. A little bit about yourself and maybe especially your association, and a little bit more even now about who Rosanna is.
Well, Rosanna was my mother, and I had the privilege, I'll call it, of growing up with this organization. I remember when I was a kid, her efforts to preserve the building. It was owned at that time by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and was in poor condition and was threatened with demolition. And she spearled the movement to preserve it, contacting other local Nyes, and there's a whole preservation story that goes with it. But I was able to witness that as a young person, and it was quite an influence. So I've been with I joined the board in 1974. They got me right out of college. And I've just enjoyed working on all the different aspects involved with the museum.
Wonderful, wonderful. John, given your longstanding history and that of your family with the museum and the site, to help provide a context and proper background before we lead up to today, would you take us through an abbreviated history of the site and just some of the milestones of how things developed over the years, please?
So we're talking about the physical site, not the organization.
Yeah, the site, and just from Benjamin Nye and how things developed over the years.
Well, Benjamin Nye and his wife-to-be, Catherine Tupper, arrived in this country as part of the Great Migration, 1635. And in essence, this was their second farm. Their first settlement after being married was at Spring Hill, a little closer to Sandwich Village. And this developed as a farm but with a special feature, having Benjamin having built a water mill.
Mm.
And also, this was located on the ancient path that led down the Cape. So, and it became essentially the main road. If you wanted to go down the Cape, you had to pass by this site. So eventually it actually developed into a bit of a village, centered around the two water mills and the blacksmith shop, and eventually a tavern and that sort of thing. And I'm trying to think of how the site evolved into the 20th century. The Division of Fisheries and Wildlife acquired much of the land in 1912, thereabouts, and developed a fish hatchery out back and a game farm on another part of the property. And they can't be left out of the history because that institution was a big influence on East Sandwich and this house, of course, which was a part of it. And after some effort, the house was deeded to the Nye Family of America Association in 1962. So from there on, it's all museum evolution. But those of us who grew up here think of it as it's no longer quite a village that it once was, but it was gained some importance by being on that old main highway and having a number of interesting little businesses here.
You know, before we hear about the museum from Marge, just a few words about your mother, Rosanna, here and her involvement in getting things off the ground in this most current phase.
Well, my mother was born right here in the old former schoolhouse in the neighborhood here, which was then called Cedarville. And she knew the people, and when she was growing up, she was familiar with this house and visited here. And as time went on, became more aware of her ancestry and genealogy. And let's see, yeah, I said before that when she realized the house was threatened with demolition, she sprang into action in spite of having a family and a business and other things going on. My mother was an antique dealer, and which was a collector and a great benefit to the museum. She would loan items sort of to get the museum started. And over time, a lot of donations from other Nye family members were made. And that's how we acquired a lot of the artifacts and fine pieces in the museum here.
Wonderful. Thank you, John, for that background leading us up to today. Marge, would you continue by sharing, for those especially who haven't had the opportunity to visit yet, an overview of the layout of the museum?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As you walk in, we have tried in our period rooms to represent the millers that lived in the house. And that was from Benjamin Nye to Samuel Henry Nye, who died in 1907. And so we have a grouping of period rooms representing the lives of those people. The room that you're showing now is the Sylvanus Nye parlor. Sylvanus Nye was the fourth miller, and he is responsible for many of the changes in the house, including making this room that we're looking at here his country parlor. He changed the fireplaces to a more efficient type of fireplace, a Rumford style fireplace with a narrow throat to conserve heat. He raised the roof of the house, so the house itself changed from a salt box, a New England salt box, to a full colonial. All of this was done in 1816, and then he died in 1820. He was a very, very busy man. He had tavern activities going on in this house. We have evidence of that architecturally of his tavern activities. And so we represent him in this first room. We then move into the 18th century kitchen, because before I move on to that, this room, the Sylvanus Nye parlor, was the 17th century kitchen, and with the large walk-in fireplace that has now been changed to an 1816 fireplace. So the back of the house in the 18th century was made into a kitchen with the large fireplace, but yet changes from the 17th century in that there's a swinging crane, a bake oven to the side of the fireplace, as opposed to being within the fireplace wall, features such as that. You then walk into a small little early chamber that Rosanna herself stenciled in a Moses Eaton stylized pineapple stencil pattern, and it's a lovely small little bedroom where we have some spinning implements. The next room is the Joseph Nye parlor. Joseph Nye was born in 1695 and died in 1750, and he was Sylvanus's father. And he introduced Georgian refinements to the house in the way of a lovely paneled end wall. And that is the feature that we talk about in that room. Going upstairs, we have the hall chamber, which shows 17th century timber framing in the corner. That used to be a closet, and it was preserved. The whitewash, the timber framing itself, the vertical sheathing, the hand split lath strips, and the plaster over it, all 17th century features. The room changed later with the addition of a milk paint over some of the framing, and then ultimately wallpaper was added in Sylvanus's time frame. And we do have remnants of that early wallpaper up there. We then have a small child's room that is a new addition. It's a very charming little room. And then we also have two museum rooms whereby we show a marine exhibit, and we are now working on an archaeological exhibit, and we have the Cedarville Library that Samuel Henry Nye, the last miller, was involved in. We have a bookshelf with the wonderful books of that time frame. So that basically is the interior of the house. You can see by this picture the original floor, which are untreated boards. That is typical way into the 18th century, actually, to have untreated boards, pine boards. So the framing is oak, and the sheathing and flooring is pine.
And it looks like they might be involved in some type of scavenger hunt, perhaps?
I'm not exactly sure what the folks are doing in that picture. I can't see it terribly well.
That was the open house scavenger hunt for the
Oh,
fox.
it was. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was something that we did with the Thornton Burgess Museum as well. Okay, so these children looking for the foxes. We have hidden in every room. And in the background of this room, called the hall chamber, you see a barn frame loom. It's a wonderful loom, and in that room we have all manner of spinning supplies and the production of flax into linen, which is very interesting. We have all of the pieces to do that process, and I'm very pleased with that.
Thank you very much for that overview. We're going to move on, Amy, and sort of pick up with Marge here, I know, but to speak about some of the extended opportunities, say for education, if you could give us an overview of what visitors can look forward to.
Sure. A few things. We have lots of different ways at the museum, including outreach programs that we have. Like, for instance, right here in the picture, Marge is giving a lecture that we just had this past spring on two of the portraits from the museum. And we brought them over to our Grange Hall, which acts as our sort of multi-use space. So here we use it for lectures. We sometimes use it for other educational events as well. We have beautiful archives, and people can make research appointments. That is something we definitely encourage, different scholars or authors or anyone interested in the Nye family history. And segueing into the Nye family history, we also have a genealogist on board. And people are more than welcome to make an appointment with her. She's virtual, so it's really convenient. Anyone from anywhere can Zoom in with her. Her name is Lori Nye, and she is a descendant herself, and she handles all of our Ancestry.com accounts and the genealogy. We also have other popular events and new events that we're starting. So other program series like art workshops and other things similar to that. We also had John do a walk recently. So that was out and about in the community. And yes, lots of different educational opportunities.
And one being special exhibitions. What was recently being highlighted here?
Sure. So Marge and John for 2024, the special exhibit is on Scorton Harbor, and they really researched into the history of a dock and shipyard that used to be in East Sandwich. And for those of you that aren't familiar with East Sandwich, it's not really an area known as well as other parts of Sandwich or other parts of the Cape for its seafaring history. So they've been working on that tirelessly for the past year, if not more, thinking about it in their minds, I'm sure, more than a year's worth of work. But I'll let John and Marge speak more to the special exhibit if they'd like to.
Well, the remains of what was essentially a wharf were uncovered by erosion in the 1990s. And that's one aspect that pulled me in. I began photographing the site, but didn't know what the remains were, but pieced it together with some interviews with well, my grandfather was the first person to tell me that an old timer told him that there had been a shipyard at Scorton Harbor, and it raises your eyebrow because you look at it today and it's just a beautiful marshside site, very peaceful. But what we discovered is that back in the day, it was really a site of great activity with two-masted schooners and sloops, not all at once, but they could access this wharf, and there was a lot of trading going on and transporting of materials. And Marge has worked on the aspect that we call trade goods. Maybe I'll let Marge explain.
Okay, well, in 2022, we were lucky to be approached with an account book that turned out through a lot of investigation to be Sylvanus Nye's account book. And Sylvanus Nye's adult life really was in the time of the Revolution up to 1820. This account book takes in a lot of that time frame as to the goods being sold here in the neighborhood. And it is a fascinating journal, if you will, of the types of goods that these sloops were going up to Boston and collecting all of these goods, and of course bringing them back to this small little community. So we were able to see exactly what people were buying. It was during the triangle trade, so therefore they were English goods. There were things from West Africa, South America, the Caribbean, West Indies, and onward up to Boston. So the folks were consuming a lot of molasses and a lot of rum.
A lot of rum.
Both men and women were consuming a lot of these things. But it is really fascinating. So we put together from potsherds that have been found in and around the property here, along with whole items of antique goods that represent those broken potsherds.
Wow.
And it really is just fascinating to see the types of things that they were purchasing, including Jamaican allspice, nutmegs, ginger. All of these things were coming from this loop around the world and ending up here in this little neighborhood.
What a fortuitous find for that journal. Well,
It was
I know, well,
absolutely
thank you. You've
incredible.
set it up for us and viewers to definitely want to be heading down with time left in the summer to see it in person. But for the sake of time, we're gonna move on. And Amy, if you could touch on here, I think we see a related opportunity to the exhibition. If you could
Yes.
highlight these next series of images and what we're seeing, please.
Sure. Well, we are really fortunate to receive support this year from the Cape Cod Foundation to provide educational opportunities relating to the special exhibit. So this past fall, we held our first art workshop here, and we did it on Sailor's Valentine, so loosely related to, the seafaring history. And we had about a dozen different women show up, and it was a wonderful evening. And coming up, we have other exhibit-related events as well, including a star party and a Scorton Creek panel discussion. So that is all coming up in the next few weeks, and we hope to have and continue other art workshops and things going forward.
Terrific. I think you mentioned a little earlier, walk around the property that John led.
Yes, this picture that you're looking at, John and his cousin Sam did a history walk last year. This year, John did a history walk out to Scorton Harbor to show everyone the site where the harbor and the dock were, and we'll be doing that also again in the fall.
Terrific, terrific. And archaeology related here.
This speaks to our preservation work. So when you think of, oftentimes at a museum, you think of preservation work in the museum itself or of the artifacts itself, and that is very important, but it also extends beyond the museum. And in this instance, it's Our Lady Nye gravestone, which is circa 1774, correct? And one of our museum friends, Dave Wheelock, he was walking around the cemetery and noticed that it was in pretty dire condition and in danger of crumbling and collapsing. So we received permission from the cemetery commissioner, and he and John were able to remove that, and we have it safely here now in our museum. So that is speaking to our preservation work, not just in the museum, but out and about in the public relating to the Nyes in Sandwich.
Wonderful. And recently the New Plymouth Guard made a visit?
Yes, they did. We had our open house in June, and we have that as an annual celebration, opening day for the museum. And the New Plymouth Guard, they were wonderful. They represented the 17th century, and they did demonstrations all day, all afternoon, I should say. And this is a fun picture we were able to capture on our property of their group.
And this looks like a fabulous opportunity, 4th of July parade and float.
Yes, so this is our second year marching in the parade and our first year doing a float. So we had different museum staff and friends and volunteers all teamed together. We had about 10 or 10 or so of us this year, and some of us dressed in our period costume. And it was a really fun way to be out in the Sandwich Village community and share who we are and invite people to visit us.
And this one speaks to another education opportunity. A lot of people attending here this lecture.
Yes, so we have a popular winter lecture series that we host, and we often bring in experts or authors to speak about a particular topic. This picture here shows Paula Marcoux, and she's a food historian, and she was talking about the history of brown bread and hearth ovens. And usually our lectures, we get about 30 to 50 people, so they're quite popular for us.
And then this one sort of brings us full circle from hearing about the history to present day, the Nye family reunion. Maybe, John, just a few words about that occurrence.
Yes, well, actually, the Nye Family Association started way back in 1903. And their big feature were reunions. And people were very excited about getting together, coming from all parts of the country and meeting their cousins and having a good time. That early organization faded out with the Great Depression, but we resumed having reunions when the preservation of this house was starting. First new reunion was 1963. And it's the same thing. People were delighted to have the opportunity to travel, sometimes from as far away as California, and meet their relatives and have a good time, see the museum. And it's been a mainstay of the organization. Every 2 years, we hold a reunion.
And our
Terrific,
next one
terrific.
is September 2025. So it's also a very good event for all Nyes to get together, but it's open to the public as well as a celebration of the Nye family. So anyone is invited.
Amy, in the closing minute or so that we have, could you just briefly share some of the other uses of the site?
Sure. We also allow people to rent out our Grange Hall for small events like weddings or bridal showers. And we have beautiful grounds as well. We have opportunities for artists to come out and do painting. We've had bird watching groups come out, the Appalachian Mountain Club hikers come out and hike the museum trails. And yeah, we're also always thinking about different ways to use the space and invite people in. I think that
Terrific. Well, in the closing credits, we'll have a website for people to keep in touch, find out upcoming and ongoing events and opportunities. But for now, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time. I want to thank the three of you again for taking the time to be here, informing us about the museum, the site. Look forward to visiting next time on the Cape and encourage others to do the same. Thank you again.
it was lovely being here. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.